Anyone else want to preach on self-control? I'll let you. It's one of those ones. There's a reason that it's at the end. We started this journey in the longest sermon series we preached at St. Matthew since I've been here. It feels like a millennia. Walking through the fruit of the Spirit one by one. And we started that journey by talking about love, that love is at the beginning, not on accident. Paul didn't just start writing down a bunch of characters for who the Spirit of God is and then just randomly throw them out on a page. He had intention behind starting with love. That love is the guide and the root for all of the other fruit, for all the other characters of this fruit. And I reminded you of an image of the redwoods just north of us that have these wide roots that spread wide and they interlock with each other. And the interlocking roots are similar to how love interlocks with all of the other character of the fruit of the Spirit, and it roots us in all things. So I thought, beginning with a plant, I should end with another favorite plant. And that is about an hour north of here. Many of you know I love it. You'll find yourself in the middle of rolling hills and vineyards of either Napa or Sonoma. It's a beautiful place. Right? Rows upon rows of vines stretching towards the horizon, branches trained along trellises, each one held and guided and lifted toward the sun. It's beautiful. But talk to any vintner, and they'll tell you that grapevines untended grow wild. They'll spill in every direction, shooting new branches faster than they can actually even bear fruit. And they'll chase light, but in doing so, lose substance. So the growers prune. Not to punish the vine, but in fact, to focus it. Not to limit growth, but to make room for what really matters. Because when the energy of the vine runs in every direction, the fruit actually stays small and sour. But when the energy is centered and when it flows through the right channels and it's trained on the trellises and light is able to hit that fruit, then what you get is some of the best juice in the world. This is what Paul's talking about when he names self-control as a part of the fruit of the Spirit. It's a centering, a Spirit-shaped focus that gives depth to all the other fruit. Paul writes in Galatians that the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. Self-control sits at the end of the list, not as a footnote, but as a centering and deepening of all of those that have come before it. Because without self-control, love can become possessive, and joy can become indulgent, and peace can become passivity, and patience can turn to avoidance, and kindness can become enabling, and goodness can become self-righteousness, and faithfulness can become rigid, and gentleness can be traded for timidity. Self-control is the fruit that intensifies and richens the flavor of the fruit itself. It's the Spirit's way of grounding us. It gives the other fruit staying power. Now, when I hear the word self-control, I do what Mary did at the first of this service and say, ugh. It was perfect because it's exactly how I was feeling. Because often I think when the church has been talking about self-control, we just add it to the list of all the things that we've told the world you should not do. Right? Just more lists of nots. Don't do this, don't do this. If you just did this better, everything would be better. But instead, this word that Paul uses, it actually means to be held together from within. Right? To be held together from within. That's what it means to have self-control. It means to have integrity, to be integral, for all things to be brought together. It's not about tightening every muscle of our will. It's about being centered and integrated as people with the Spirit. So self-control then isn't about saying no to life. It's about saying yes to what gives life its depth. It's about alignment, right? It's about harmonizing our interbeing with the Spirit's way in our world. So Paul reaches for this metaphor in 1 Corinthians 9, where he says, every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable crown, but we're after this imperishable crown. And athletes place limits not to diminish themselves, but to actually extend their capacity, to train their muscle memory, so that when the moment comes, they actually don't have to think about it. Right? So marathon runners, like I would know, yeah, exactly. Work up to it. Right? There was a day where I got really close to running a marathon and broke my ankle. I was up to 17 miles. And I ran, and I started at a mile feeling like I was going to die. But you just keep persistently showing up. And most good marathoners, people who are training for a marathon, will work up months and months and months in advance so that when they get to that 20 plus miles of their training, that when they run it, their body already knows what to do when it starts freaking out. Because your body's going to freak out. It's what our bodies do. Nobody's meant to run 20 miles, people. And so you got to train yourself to do that. And that's exactly what Paul is talking about, but he's talking about it with our spiritual lives. That through the rhythms of community and shared meals and prayer and reading the sacred text and worship and rest and service and connection, the Spirit is actually training us so that love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control become our reflex. That joy becomes a posture. That gentleness becomes a strength because it's built into us. So that when that person cuts us off on the freeway and our body says, do this, our spirit says, just breathe. Or when our kids are losing their minds, mine don't do that. But when they're losing their minds, instead of losing our minds to match their losing minds, our frontal cortex taps in and says, be at peace. Let it go. Self-control is not an external command. It's an inner coherence. The Spirit and self moving in sacred connection together. And if we want to understand what self-control is, we need to look no further than at Jesus himself. Jesus embodied a spirit-centered freedom. He lives rooted in his center. Unless we think our world is crazy and chaotic, which it is, in the world that Jesus lived, you would walk down the streets ruled by Rome and there would be crucifixes lining the road. Imagine trying to live centered in that space under the rule of empire. And yet, Jesus moved through temptation and oppression and betrayal and violence without losing himself in his connection to the Spirit. Think right after he was baptized and the Spirit descends upon him, he goes to the wilderness, and for 40 days in the midst of hunger and tempting whispering, inviting him to power and control and comfort, Jesus refuses to grasp at what is immediate or easy. And his restraint was not a denial of desire. It was devotion to love and to God. Or go forward in time 3 years, and he's praying in the Garden of Gethsemane with his friends, and he's brought these 3 friends just to come pray with him and to stay awake and just be there for a moment, and they fall asleep. And in the midst of their sleep and his prayer with God, he wants to let go of all that is about to happen to him, and yet he still prays, God, not my will, but yours. This deep act of self-control, surrender without despair, obedience without coercion. And then at the cross, when every impulse should be toward anger and retaliation, Jesus centers himself in love and he breathes forgiveness instead of fury. He gives himself rather than saving himself. This is what spirit-born control looks like. Jesus' self-control is love with a backbone. It's peace with purpose. It's joy that even in the midst of joy can still hold pain and not deny its realness. We live in a world where American Christianity has lost its center. We've confused freedom with outrage. We've mistaken conviction for control and passion for permission. The very people called to bear the fruit of the Spirit, we've often become known for our anger and our excess and our reaction. Scroll through social media and you'll see it. Christians tearing each other apart. Baptizing cruelty as I'm telling the truth. Turn on the news and you'll find faith leaders who are drunk on power, movements who are fueled more by fear than by love. And too many of us have embraced a performative faith that's loud and impulsive and defensive, but it is not one shaped by the Spirit. And yet, Paul says to us, against these fruit, there is no law. The fruit of the Spirit is meant to make us free. Self-control is not a weakness. It's the quiet strength that keeps the body of Christ from devouring itself. Imagine what would change if the church reclaimed that fruit and slowed our reactions. few years ago, I went to a lecture to learn about Malbec in Argentina. I know I'm boring. And I learned about two men who took these grapevines that looked like Cousin It. For those of you who aren't old, it's an old show. And they were just a rootstock with tons of vines coming off and laying on the ground, and it was just everywhere. And Malbec was trash wine. It wasn't worth drinking. And two men came in and said, wait a second, if we could just lift this and give it light and allow things to happen, then we could turn this whole thing around. And so they crafted in the 1980s, this was just a few years back, crafted trellises and began to train those vines. And the fruit began to become rich and intense in flavor and beautiful and make some of the best wine in the world. And it's the third largest market of grapes in the world. Simply by paying attention to what matters. What if we spoke with grace before posting with rage? What if we trellised and practiced limits on our consumption and our engagement with all of this stuff coming at us? What if we again learned the discipline of listening to each other? What if we began to lift each other up so that the light can shine in on us? Self-control could actually be the reformation that we need, that our world is dying to drink from. Not a movement of dominance, but a movement of depth. A church marked with patience instead of panic. Marked with humility instead of hubris. And with peace instead of perpetual outrage. Our world is drinking from crappy vines. But they don't have to. We're invited to root ourselves in the Spirit of God. To let the fruit grow. But it's going to require some training of ourselves. Right? Some practices that we put in place so that these things become, like the runner, simply something that we do in the hard moments because we figured it out along the way together. So imagine a vineyard in late summer. The vines have been trained and they are full of heavy fruit. And the air smells of sweetness and sun. That's what the Spirit longs to cultivate in us. A life not overgrown with impulse, but abundant with intention. Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness, and faithfulness, and gentleness, and self-control. And it's self-control that lets the whole vineyard flourish. And it's self-control that makes the wine worth drinking. So may it be. May we root ourselves. May we do the hard work, and may we do it together. Please pray with me. Gracious God, if I am honest, I hate self-control. I prefer to do whatever I want in the moment. I kind of like to overdo everything. And yet, you invite us into something different. So may we root ourselves in your Spirit, and may these fruit take root in us. And then may your world be able to drink from your goodness that pours from who we are.